Hi, want to hear something scary?
Harlan stared at the girl in the coffee shop. He had never seen such a vision of pure beauty. Although he was usually shy, he made his way over to talk to her. As if something was pulling him, he was thrilled when she smiled and motioned for him to join her. Several hours and many coffees later, he asked her out on a date. When Harlan arrived at the restaurant the next evening, Jenny was already seated. Somehow, she looked even more beautiful than before, this time wearing a wonderful green dress that not only enhanced her beautiful eyes, but also the green ribbon around her neck. He remembered she worn it yesterday too. Over the next few months, Harlan and Jenny spent almost all of their time together. Their relationship blossomed quickly into true love. Jenny's slender neck was always wrapped in the same velvet green ribbon, which Harlan couldn't help but admire. But he was so smitten with Jenny, he never thought to ask about it. Until one day he took her to the beach. It was warm and she was wearing a stunning green bathing suit. He suggested they head into the sea to cool down for a bit. He watched her remove her cover-up, slip off her sandals, and make her way into the water. But she was still wearing the ribbon tied in a dainty bow. "Jenny," he asked, "why don't you take off your ribbon? It'll get soggy in the sea." For the first time during their blissful few months together, Harlan saw something momentarily flash in Jenny's eyes. Then she smiled and said, "My choker is very special. I never, ever take it off." So despite thinking it slightly odd, Harlan didn't mention it again. He took her back to the same restaurant on the 6-month anniversary and presented her with an expensive gold locket. Jenny gasped when she opened the box and threw her arms around him. But when he reached for the ribbon, intending to take it off and replace it with the gift, she brushed his hand away, reminding him of her previous words. "The necklace, darling. I shall treasure it, but the choker never comes off, remember? It never comes off." Again, he saw the split-second flash in her eyes as she spoke. Not wanting to upset the woman he adored so much, he promised that he wouldn't try to trick her again. That said, it bothered him that on their wedding day, when Jenny looked like a fairy tale princess all in white and shimmering with pearls, she wore the green ribbon. He found it strange and off-putting, but obeyed her wish to not mention it. The fact that she insisted on wearing the green scarf no matter what the doctor said when going through the stringent birth plan of their first child concerned him. He kept his word though, even as she was being rushed into the hospital for an emergency C-section. Yet it ate away at him. Whenever he dared to approach the subject, asking why did she always wear it, why did she not remove it when sleeping, bathing, anything at all, she would simply reply, "All I ever ask from you, Harlan, is to allow me this one thing. I can't explain it, but I will not remove it. And neither must you. Promise me." So despite loving Jenny very much and being a good father, Harlan's resentment festered just below the surface. Until Jenny got sick. His wife was seldomly ill, but not long after her 50th birthday, she was struck with a very bad case of pneumonia and spent the day and night coughing and struggling to breathe. She was fast asleep after an extreme coughing fit, having exhausted herself, when Harlan broke his promise. He told himself the choker was now not only inconvenient, but an actual danger to her. Jenny needed help breathing, not a restriction around her neck, and so with shaking hands and feeling just a little smug, he took a pair of nail scissors from the dresser and snipped off the ribbon which he had grown to loathe. Thump! He turned his head. As Harlan looked down at the floor, he screamed. He screamed again and fell onto his knees. "No, no, no!" he cried out, staring in disbelief at the object that had fallen on the floor. And just before he fainted from shock, she spoke. Jenny's decapitated head, which now lay on the floor while her body remained on the bed, spoke. "I told you not to take the ribbon off, Didn't I?
One night, Regina slept over at her cousin Tiff's while her aunt and uncle were on an overnight work trip. The girls made a blanket fort in Tiff's living room and stayed up late to tell each other spooky stories. Tiff's family had only recently moved into the house, but she was anxious to tell her cousin a story about her new home. Apparently, 10 years ago, the first owners of this house claimed their young daughter Ella had gone missing, began Tiff. They were in the living room, watching TV, when they heard their daughter's screams from the bathroom. There was scratching and whimpering coming from behind the door. The father shouted Ella's name, but there was no response. When the dad managed to kick down the bathroom door, they nearly fainted at what they saw. The floor and walls were covered in blood. Scratches covered the shower curtain, and in the bathtub, the water was stained with blood. But Ella was gone. The room was empty, door locked. But the window, the light of the full moon shone through the window that something had crashed through from the outside. The lack of evidence led the police around in circles, but the girl was never found. Sometime later, a neighbor went out to feed their dog and found another dog hogging the bowl. But it was a weird dog, hairless all over, long black hair on its head. It looked like a human girl, but it had a snout and jaw like a dog. Snarling, it turned and ran off on all fours. Other neighbors saw the dog girl too, and even recorded footage that made it onto the news. The police made a DNA match on a piece of hair it left behind. The dog girl was Ella. It turns out that after she'd somehow been transformed into this wild thing, she tried to go back home, but her parents couldn't handle her and tried to abandon her in the wild. When they were caught neglecting her, the dad committed suicide and the mom was locked away for abandoning their child. What happened to Ella? Regina asked. They didn't know what to do with her either. She was half child, half dog, Tiff continued. They say she was taken into a lab or sanctuary, but before they could figure out what to do, she got loose. And people still see her wandering the streets to this day. A sudden growl and barking surrounded the tent, and Regina jumped out and onto the couch to see a video of a barking dog on the living room TV. Tiff rolled on the ground with laughter. Regina stormed out of the room and huffed that she was going to go brush her teeth. As Tiff was catching her breath, she suddenly heard scratching and tapping on the tile in the front hall. Regina, I thought you went to the bathroom. Tiff peered into the darkened hallway and saw a figure in the dark, sniffing around on all fours like a dog. The scratching intensified. Hey, Regina, sorry about the joke, but can you stop that? At the sound of her voice, Tiff watched as the figure froze, focused on her, and started to growl low in its throat, then began approaching her on its hands and feet. Regina, Tiff whimpered, feeling the cold draft blow in through the now open front door. As the shape stalked closer, Tiff realized it wasn't Regina at all. Out of the dark emerged a large, pale snout with snarling fangs and a head of long, tangled black hair. Its human-like eyes locked with Tiff's as the beast's shuddering jaw growled and dripped foam, steam panting off its breath. Its claws tapped and scratched on the tile. The claws were attached to limbs, resembling human hands and feet. It agilely crept closer. Ella? Regina would never forget the unearthly snarling, tearing, and screaming she heard from the hall as she came out of the bathroom, hands still wet from the sink. She had no way to explain to Tiff's parents or authorities the trail of blood and evidence of struggle that had been dragged through the front door. When Tiff's mangled remains were found, her death had been ruled as an animal attack. But deep down, Regina knew Ella had come home.
In Spain in the 1990s, there lived a 12-year-old girl named Lucia. She lived on a farm surrounded by fields with her two parents, Every other weekend or so, her parents had to go into town for different business reasons, conventions, conferences, what have you. Lucia was much too young to tag along with them, so they would leave her at home where her cousin Emily would babysit. Emily was only 3 years older than Lucia, so she would always protest. "Why do I even need a babysitter? I'm old enough to watch myself." But her parents disagreed. Lucia probably wouldn't have minded this as much if she actually liked her cousin. But Emily loved to play pranks on her. She'd always try to scare her with monster stories or try to convince her that her toys were possessed. So it was a Friday morning, and Lucia's parents had left, leaving Lucia and Emily alone on the farm. Emily was going to make them breakfast, so she asked Lucia to gather some eggs from the hens. Lucia walked over to the coop and noticed something in the corner of her eye. In the middle of the field was a scarecrow. It hadn't been there before, so Lucia was positive it was just one of her cousin's pranks. She rolled her eyes and went to get the eggs. She didn't mention to Emily that she saw the scarecrow. She was just going to ignore it. The next morning, Lucia went to gather more eggs for breakfast. The scarecrow was still there in the field. Lucia chuckled to herself, entertained by her cousin's attempts to scare her. When she gathered the eggs and walked back to the house, she stopped in her tracks. The scarecrow was now much closer than it was before. "Okay, that got me," Lucia chuckled to herself. She didn't notice it before because it was so far away, but Lucia was shocked by how ugly it was. She grabbed an egg and threw it at its grotesque face. She pranced into the kitchen and placed the bucket of eggs on the counter. "I'll admit it, that scarecrow's pretty good," Lucia said. Emily looked up from the pan. "What are you talking about?" "You can stop the act, cousin. How long did it take you to make that?" Emily turned the stove off and wrinkled her brow. "Where did you say you saw the scarecrow?" "It's right where you last left it, at the edge of the field." Emily rushed over to the window and looked around. Lucia skipped up behind her and looked out as well. But the scarecrow was gone. "Whoa, how'd you do that?" Emily hastily pulled the curtain closed and pulled Lucia to the ground, lowering her voice to a whisper. "Lucia, are you familiar with the bubak?" "Ugh, you are unbelievable." "Listen to me. It came for one of my friends not too long ago. It goes after young children. It makes a sound like a crying baby to make you come near it, and when you're close enough, it takes you and throws you in his sack to eat later. We have to stick together today." "Cool story, cousin. I'm gonna go read in my room. Don't bother me until dinner, okay?" So Lucia locked herself in her room and read her fantasy book on her bed. She didn't even realize she had fallen asleep until she was awoken by a sound coming from the other side of her room. It was a baby crying. "Nice try, cuz," Lucia drowsily shouted into the darkness. She reached over and turned her lamp on and was startled by the figure in her room. It was the scarecrow.
"Lucia? Lucia, are you there?"
A muffled cry came from behind it. Lucia spotted the large, writhing sack where the sound was coming from. "Seriously, Emily, when are you going to give it up?" Lucia got out of her bed and approached the scarecrow, ready to call her cousin out. But with every step, her confidence began to wear off. The closer she got, the more details she noticed. The pole holding up its hideous body slowly began to coil like a snake. This scarecrow was alive.
"Lucia, run!"
The scarecrow revealed its raggedy arms from underneath its tattered clothes and raised them towards Lucia. She ran out of her bedroom, frantically searching for a place to hide. She could hear the bubak slithering not too far behind her. She ran into the kitchen and hid inside the smallest cupboard that she could squeeze into. And she waited. She was going to wait there for as long as she could. Her parents would be home the next morning. She was going to make it. Just then, the kitchen phone rang. It went to voicemail. "Hi, Lucy. It's Mom and Dad. We actually booked a couple more meetings out here, and we thought a lot about it, and You know, you're right. You are a big girl and you can take care of yourself for another day or so. And Emily, we know we only paid you until tomorrow morning, so feel free to go home. Lucy will be fine. So, yeah, just call us back at our hotel when you get the chance, okay? Love you.
12-year-old Atsuko recently moved to a new neighborhood with her family. She was very lonely, and more than anything else, wanted a friend. During one stormy night, she heard a small melodic voice coming from outside that said,
My name is Licca-chan. Please let me in. I'm so cold.
Atsuko opened the door but saw nothing at first. Confused, she finally looked down, and right below her was a doll, one unlike any other that she owned. Atsuko realized it was a Licca-chan. The dolls were famous in Japan. Similar to the American Barbie dolls, they came in a wide variety of styles. This one looked vintage and had long, silky black hair. It wore a striking yellow flower-printed kimono. It was beautiful, but the doll and its outfit were soaked from laying on the ground. Atsuko looked around for the doll's owner, but after seeing no one, she picked it up and brought it inside. Atsuko placed it on the kitchen table and went to grab a towel so she could clean it up. When she returned, she found the doll sitting there, looking straight at her, with its arm pointing her way. Atsuko could have sworn she did not leave it like that. But out of the excitement for her new toy, she laughed it off. She dried the doll off and dressed up its hair until finally it was as good as new. She played with the Licca-chan doll for hours and finally held it close and swore, "We'll be best friends forever. No one will ever get between us." Now Atsuko was no longer lonely, and once she started up at her new school, she found she even had the confidence to make new friends. She decided to invite her two closest friends, Mizuki and Kyoko, over one day after school. When Mizuki spotted Atsuko's doll, she sneered and mocked Atsuko for still playing with dollies. She informed Atsuko that they were practically teenagers and only babies had dolls. Embarrassed, Atsuko shoved the doll into the trash bin and claimed it wasn't important. Kyoko was alarmed at this and warned both girls not to throw away Licca-chan dolls because they were known to be cursed. Kyoko explained that her grandmother told her stories about dolls that were thrown away, seeking revenge against those that disrespected them, even going so far as killing those foolish enough to disregard the curse. Atsuko started to remove the doll from the trash, but Mizuki laughed at them both for being superstitious. "Only babies believe in stories like that," she teased. Atsuko looked at the doll. It almost looked like it was peering out of the bin back at her. Even though its beautiful features hadn't changed, it looked different now. It looked angry. Mizuki walked over to the bin and used her foot to push the doll all the way down. Out of sight, out of mind. Atsuko soon forgot about it, and her friends went on to have a fun day together. After they left, she felt uneasy about what had happened to the doll, but decided it was time she grew up. So, she left it in the trash. At school the next day, Mizuki never showed up, and Atsuko was immediately worried. Later that day, everyone learned that Mizuki had tragically died. There were rumors all around school that she had actually been murdered, and that when she was found, she had small puncture marks all over her neck. Atsuko knew deep inside that this was all her fault and ran home as fast as she could. She ran into her room and looked inside the trash bin, but the Licca-chan doll was gone. Was the curse real after all? It couldn't be. When her parents arrived home, they found Atsuko in tears in her room. She explained to them what happened, and they comforted her as best they could and also reminded her it was trash day. The doll was long gone. They promised to buy her another and put her to bed for the night. Slowly, the doll and the horrible tragedy left her mind, and she drifted to sleep. Suddenly, a familiar voice jolted her awake.
My name is Licca-chan, and you are a liar.
Atsuko looked around her dark room, but the doll was nowhere to be found. Just as she thought her mind was playing tricks on her, the same voice cried,
You said we'd be best friends forever.
Something scuttled across the floor in the dark, and Atsuko stood upright on her bed. Grabbing the flashlight under her pillow, she braced herself in the corner, jerkily scanning the floor surrounding her bed. Breath gasping, light swinging back and forth, but nothing was there. Then the silence was broken by a tinkling giggle, and the cursed doll spoke once again.
You treated me like trash.
This time, the voice came from above, and just as Atsuko looked up, shining the light above, the doll dropped from the ceiling, clutching onto her face. Atsuko tried to scream, but the sharp plastic hands of Licca-chan stabbed deep into her neck, over and over again. Atsuko tried to beat the murderous doll off of her while she attempted to stop the bleeding from her many wounds with the other, but it was all too much. Atsuko's vision dimmed, and at last she saw nothing except death. The next morning, at a house a few streets over, a very lonely girl heard a small melodic voice coming from outside her home. And like always, the cursed Licca-chan doll found a new best friend. Bree stood impatiently on her front porch. It had been 4 years since her best friend Finn had moved out of state, and she couldn't wait to finally be reunited. So much had happened since the 6th grade, Bree wondered if it would be strange being together again. But as soon as Finn pulled up in a beat-up station wagon, music blaring, Bree knew he was the same loud, clumsy dude he'd always been. Later, the two reminisced about the games they used to play and mischief they'd gotten into. Finn remembered Bree's collection of dolls and how they creeped him out. While they'd been put away years ago, Bree's memories were filled with dress-up and tea parties. Again, Finn reminded her that one in particular had eyes that didn't match the others. They were solid black. Bree, remembering that it had beautiful hazel eyes, suggested they pull the dolls out of the attic so she could prove him wrong. After several minutes of shuffling through boxes, there they were. All 6 dolls in their boxes. Finn immediately spotted the one called Samantha, and just like he said, her eyes were completely black. She didn't look like the doll on the box, but something far more sinister. Bree was taken aback, as the only thing she could remember was that Samantha was her last doll. She'd stopped collecting them after her, but she couldn't remember why. Finn playfully grabbed Samantha and began miming her voice, calling her the devil's child. Bree laughed at her friend being silly. Just then, the door to the attic slammed shut, plunging them into darkness. Bree called out to Finn. He threw Samantha across the attic and blindly ran toward Bree. I told you something was wrong with that doll, he whispered in her ear. They began to make their way to the attic, but with each step, another came from the direction of where Samantha had been thrown. If they took 2 steps, they heard 2 steps. Those steps growing closer, and the friends decided to run the rest of the way. Once they reached the door, they realized it was locked from the outside. They banged, pushed, and pulled, but the door didn't budge. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted, and the steps that they had heard, the tiny steps that they could hear, were now just inches behind them. Finn grabbed onto Bree's hand. They could see each other's faces through a light coming through a crack in the door jamb. That is, until Finn was ripped away suddenly and thrown clear across the attic. Bree could hear him bouncing from one side to the next, crashing into boxes, letting out painful screams along the way. Then, a huge crash and silence. Bree heard the attic door slowly unlock, and as it opened, she could see Finn lying on the floor, covered in scratches and blood. He wasn't moving. She ran to him, and his eyes were wide open. She leaned in closer, begging for him to be okay, but all she saw as she kneeled inches from his face were 2 solid black eyes and his lifeless body. Through her tears, she looked up for answers. In the corner sat Samantha, looking just like her regular self, with her deep, dark eyes. But now, she had a newly painted grin on her face.
Sun was carrying her laundry down the dimly lit hallway, her thoughts preoccupied with her daughter, Sam. Ever since her accident, Sam had been acting very strangely. She had suffered amnesia after flipping over her bike's handlebars, and her daughter's usual bubbly behavior had taken a dark turn ever since. Suddenly, she stepped on something small and hard. "Ouch!" she yelped, and dropped the basket to the floor. She clutched her foot in pain. "Damn it!" she snapped, her frustration evident in her voice. "I told you kids not to leave your toys out." As she recovered from the initial pain, Sun looked around to see what toys she had stepped on. She picked up the object from the floor, a detached head from one of Sam's Barbie dolls. It was really worn out. Normally, the dolls were kept in pristine condition, but this one was different. Its eyes were eerily blacked out with nail polish, sending a shiver down Sun's spine. Feeling a sense of unease, Sun decided to keep the creepy doll head and put it in her pocket. She glanced into Sam's room. Sam and her little sister Kyra were sitting at their desks, looking busy with their homework. But when Sun looked closer, what she saw in Sam's papers were gruesome drawings of monsters and dead dolls. Sun couldn't shake off the feeling that something was way off. Later that evening, Sun approached Sam's bed to say goodnight. As she leaned down to kiss her forehead, she yelped in horror. Next to Sam on the pillow was the same creepy doll head she had found earlier, the one with blacked out eyes. Sun's heart raced as she reached into her pocket, where she put the object earlier, only to find it empty. The broken toy had mysteriously made its way onto Sam's pillow. Over the following weeks, Sun discovered more evidence of Sam's disturbed state. She found tortured doll parts scattered throughout the house, each one more distorted than the last. Limbs ripped apart, heads twisted unnaturally. It was as if someone or something was delighted in tormenting these innocent toys. When questioned about the incidents, Sam would simply say, "Samantha made me do it." Her trembling finger pointed to the doll head, which she had given the same name as herself, Samantha. Sam claimed that Samantha was the one controlling her actions, compelling her to carry out these depraved acts. Sun's anxiety reached its peak when she heard Kyra's terrified screams echoing throughout the house. Panic gripped her as she sprinted towards the source of the distress. Bursting into the room, Sun found Sam with Kyra trapped in a headlock. Sam's eyes were covered in a magic marker, mimicking the same eerie blackness as Samantha's. Sam was treating Kyra like one of her dolls, attempting to pop off her little sister's head, acting on pure instinct. Sun summoned all her strength and forcefully separated the two girls. Sam was thrown backward, slamming into the wall with a sickening thud. Blood oozed from the wound on her head as she laid motionless on the floor. Paramedics arrived swiftly, rushing Sam and Kyra to the hospital for immediate medical attention. However, when Sam regained conscience, her memories were fragmented and distorted. All she could utter was a chilling phrase, "Samantha made me do it." The authorities were called, and an investigation began into the disturbing evidence that had taken place within Sun's home. They searched every inch, collecting the remnants of the shattered dolls as evidence. Yet, no matter how hard they looked, they found no trace of Samantha, the malevolent force that had seemingly possessed Sam. To this day, Sun and Sam remain haunted by the memories of those weeks. The shattered dolls, the chilling whispers of Samantha made me do it. The inexplicable disappearance of the doll's head that initiated the nightmare. The events left them with a lingering fear, a constant reminder of the darkness that can reside within the most innocent of things, waiting to be awakened by an unsuspecting victim.
Kamiko was a beautiful young woman who was only held back by her shyness. So when Takeshi, a classmate to her when they were little and now captain of the soccer team, asked her out, she was thrilled but beyond nervous. Their hometown of Kyushu, Japan, had many romantic areas, but none as popular for high school dates as the secret beach. And that was exactly where they were headed. The secret beach was very picturesque, but private because it was forbidden. A lot of trouble seemed to occur there, including a few people who had recently gone missing. There were rumors that a creature known as the Nuri-onna, a huge sea snake with a human head, claws, and vampiric tastes, might be the cause. Kamiko was scared of the old legends, but she was far more worried about looking cool in front of Takeshi. Embarrassed to be nerdy enough to even know the stories, she decided not to put a damper on the mood and kept it to herself. The date was going well. Takeshi made her laugh about old times as they walked close together down to the picturesque shore. She felt like she could come out of her shell with Takeshi. As they ventured even closer to the water, Kamiko began to become uncomfortable with thoughts of aquatic fiends, but was distracted when Takeshi held her hand. It was a warm day, but as they rounded the bottom of a cliff, it blocked out the sun. The air got cooler and it got darker. Kamiko shivered, and Takeshi held her closer and began to lean in for a kiss. That's when the screaming began. Terrified screams from a woman nearby. "Help! My baby! My baby! I can't swim!" The couple ran towards the water and found a woman thrashing in the ocean some distance from the shore. With one arm, she supported a baby above the crashing waves. Kamiko was a skilled swimmer and Takeshi a natural athlete, so they both leapt into the raging waters without hesitation to help the mother and child. When they reached the woman, she quickly handed her baby off to Kamiko and latched onto Takeshi for dear life. As the woman caught her breath, Kamiko realized that she was able to stand in the water, which surprised her given her own smaller height. As Takeshi escorted the woman back towards the shore, Kamiko noticed something seemed to be following them. She looked down to see if maybe the woman was caught in seaweed and realized, much too late, what the woman actually was. That from the shoulders down, she was different. The woman's arms were actually crooked with long black nails that resembled a dragon's claws. Her skin had scales that glittered under the water. The woman peered over Takeshi's shoulder and stared at Kamiko with a hunger in her eyes. She licked her lips, revealing dagger-like teeth that dripped with drool. Kamiko stopped, dead in her tracks with the stories of the Nuri-onna racing through her mind. She looked down and saw that the baby she thought she held was in fact nothing alive at all. Just a homunculus of decaying sea life made to look like a baby. Kamiko screamed and tried to throw the imposter child away from her, but it suddenly sprang to undead life and held on tight, dragging her like an anchor into the water below. She fought against the baby doppelganger's grip, struggling to break the surface. She then felt a serpentine tail slither its way around her body. It squeezed her, slowly crushing her breath from her. Her eyes followed along the tail until she found Takeshi, struggling with the rest of the monster. Its claws were embedded so deep in his skin that she couldn't see any trace of them. The snake-like tongue of this gruesome creature was buried into Takeshi's throat, acting as a straw as it slurped his blood. As the coils of the monster tightened, the the fake putrid baby fell away from Kumiko. She realized this might be her only chance to escape. With no other option, she bit as hard as she could into the monster's flesh, causing it to loosen just enough for her to make her escape. Takeshi's eyes met Kumiko's, and with the last of his strength, he began to choke the Nuri Onna, keeping it occupied long enough for Kumiko to breach the surface and gasp for breath. However, before she could dive back under and try to rescue Takeshi, the tail of the Nuri Onna whipped out, knocking her backwards into the strong waves that then washed her back to shore. Neither her crush nor the monster ever surfaced, and the once shy woman knew that she would spend the rest of her life hunting this murderous, cunning beast, out for revenge against the Nuri Onna.
Far out in the ocean, the water is as blue as the petals of the loveliest cornflower and as clear as the purest glass. But it is very deep, too. It goes down deeper than any anchor rope will go, and many, many steeples would have to be stacked one on top of another to reach from the bottom to the surface of the sea. It is down there that the sea folk live. There was the Sea Queen, along with her granddaughters, the Sea Princesses. They were 6 lovely girls, but the youngest was the most beautiful of them all. Her skin was as soft and tender as a rose petal, and her eyes were as blue as the deep sea. But like all the others, she had no feet. Her body ended in a fishtail. The little mermaid loved hearing stories about the human world above. Her grandmother told her all she knew about ships and cities and of people and animals. The flowers were fragrant up there, for those at the bottom of the sea had no scent. When you are 15, her grandmother said, you will be allowed to rise up out of the ocean and sit on the rocks in the moonlight to watch the great ships sailing by. On her 15th birthday, the little mermaid rose up to the surface and watched a birthday celebration being held on a ship in honor of a handsome prince. She watched in awe as he laughed and smiled and shook people by the hand, while the music rang out in the perfect evening. She couldn't take her eyes off of him. Then a violent storm hit, sinking the boat. The little mermaid swam towards the sinking prince and pulled him ashore. He lay there unconscious near a temple. She waited from a distance until a young woman from the temple found him. The prince regained consciousness and mistook the temple woman for his rescuer. He never even saw the little mermaid. Distraught, she dove back into the ocean. If men aren't drowned, the little mermaid asked her grandmother, do they live on forever? They too must die, and their lifetimes are even shorter than ours. We can live to be 300 years old, but when we perish, we turn into mere foam on the sea. We have no immortal soul. Human beings, on the contrary, have a soul which lives forever, long after their bodies have turned to clay. It rises through thin air up to the shining stars. Just as we rise through the water to see the lands on earth, so men rise up to beautiful places unknown, which we shall never see. I would gladly give up my 300 years if I could be a human for a day and later share in that heavenly realm. You must not think about that. We are much better off than the folk up there. The little mermaid, longing for the prince and an eternal soul, visited the sea witch in a dangerous part of the ocean. The witch willingly sold her a potion that would give her legs in exchange for her tongue and beautiful voice. She warned her that once she became a human, she will never be able to return to the sea. And she will only obtain a soul if she won the love of the prince and married him. Otherwise, at dawn on the first day after he married someone else, the little mermaid would die with a broken heart and dissolve into sea foam upon the waves. After she agreed to the arrangement, the little mermaid swam to the surface near the prince's palace and drank the potion. The liquid felt like a sword piercing through her body, and she passed out on the shore, naked. When she came to, the prince was standing above her. He asked her where she came from, but she couldn't speak. He pulled her up, and for the first time she saw her 2 new human legs. He walked her back to his palace to give her clothes, but every step she took was agony. It felt like she was stepping on knives. It was horribly unpleasant, but she knew this was part of the bargain. Over time, the Little Mermaid and the prince became great friends, but unfortunately, nothing more. When the prince's parents encouraged their son to marry, he asked for the temple woman's hand, for he thought she was the one who rescued him after the storm. So the Little Mermaid had no choice but to silently witness the prince marry his new bride aboard a wedding ship. After the ceremony, she looked to the east to see the first red hint of daybreak, for she knew that the first flash of the sun would strike her dead. Then she saw her sisters rise up among the waves. There was no sign of their lovely long hair that the breezes used to blow. It had all been cut off. "We have given our hair to the witch," they said, "so that she would send you help and save you from death tonight. She gave us this knife. Before the sun rises, you must strike it into the prince's heart, and when his warm blood bathes your feet, they will grow together and become a fishtail. Then you will be a mermaid again, and you can come back to us in the sea and live out your 300 years. Hurry!
Come back to us, sister.
We miss you." The Little Mermaid entered the prince's room, where he and his bride lay fast asleep. Slowly, she raised the magic blade above his head, and she heard him speak his bride's name in his sleep. The blade fell from her trembling hands. "The prince's happiness is my happiness. Good night, sweet prince." She walked back outside, stood on the edge of the ship, and threw herself into the ocean just as dawn broke. Her body dissolved into foam, but instead of ceasing to exist, she turned into a luminous and ethereal earthbound spirit, a daughter of the air. Because of her selflessness, she was given the chance to earn a soul, and after 300 years of good deeds to humanity, she will rise up to where no mermaid had been before.
Since Shu was a child, she was fascinated with ocean wildlife. So it made sense that she would grow up to be a marine biologist for the Shanghai Ocean Aquarium in China. Her boyfriend Wang Lei did not care for his girlfriend's choice in career and held no love for the ocean or its inhabitants. One day, a fisherman brought in something to the aquarium that would change Shu's life forever. An octopus that had been tangled in the fisherman's net. While that wasn't out of the ordinary, this particular octopus was special. It was a bright orange color with black markings on it that looked like ancient scars. Instead of the usual black eyes, this one had bright blue human-like eyes. As Shu took the creature to the exam room, she swore it was watching her. On the table, Shu began to sing to it, and in response, the octopus wrapped its arms around her hand and wrist. But whenever Shu would rotate it, it would instinctively release her, allowing her to complete her examination, as if it was listening to Shu's verbal cues. "Do you understand me?" Shu whispered. The octopus blinked its blue eyes as if to say yes. Shu smiled and said, "I'm gonna call you Lanny," which meant blue. Then Lanny wrapped its arms once more around Shu's fingers, happy for its new name. Like all the creatures in the aquarium, Lanny was attended to by multiple members of the staff, and this did not sit well with the octopus. If anyone but Shu tried to feed or care for it, they would get slapped by one of Lanny's 8 arms. One night, when a new intern went to feed Lanny, it wrapped its arms around the man, pulling him into the tank and below the surface of the water. He struggled to break free, but the octopus's hold was too strong. The octopus pulled the man closer until they stared into each other's eyes. Just as he could no longer hold his breath and the water started to drown him, the octopus let go. The intern survived, but everyone at the aquarium knew that this breed of octopus had a venomous bite capable of paralyzing or perhaps even killing someone, and it was only a matter of time before it happened. Sadly, the management decided they could no longer take the risk of housing the animal. The aquarium gave Shu the option to keep the octopus or return it back to sea. Shu, without hesitation, set up a large and comfortable aquarium within her apartment. Her partner, Wang Lei, was less than thrilled, and things that were already strained in their relationship became much worse. As days turned to weeks, Wang Lei's temper grew shorter and shorter. Everything from dish chores to texting back more promptly, or even if they disagreed on what to watch, would become an impossible argument that somehow she was at fault for. Everything began to set Wang Lei off, and Lonnie saw all of it through its glass house in the living room. The tension and stress kept building until finally, one night, Wang Lei was livid, screaming at Shu about how this wasn't the life he envisioned and how he could do better, threatening to leave her for someone who didn't always smell like the sea. And just when Shu was about to set him straight about things, Wang Lei slammed the bedroom door on her. The door caught her in the face, giving her a bloody nose. Wang Lei, still full of rage, looked at her bloody face, his hands clenched into fists, then unclenched as he stormed out of their apartment. Shu, somewhat in shock, walked up to the aquarium and placed her hand on it. Lonnie did the same with its arm. The octopus's gentle eyes soothed her, and eventually Shu fell asleep on the couch. The next morning, Shu awoke to a strange silence. She'd heard her boyfriend return home late that night, but decided to stay out on the couch while he slept in their bed. However, he was normally up by now and getting ready for work. Shu stood and looked in the aquarium, but Lonnie wasn't there. She feared the worst. She knew Wang Lei hated the octopus, knew he must have done something horrible. Adrenaline filled her as she sped towards the bedroom, swiftly moving down the hall. A dampened trail on the carpet led the way, and as she got closer to the bedroom door, the damp carpet turned red. Flinging open the bedroom door, she found blood everywhere, and at its center, in the middle of the bed, were Wang Lei and Lonnie. Wang Lei thrashed as the arms of the octopus wrapped tighter around his throat. He was covered in so many bite marks that more than enough of the deadly octopus poison was already coursing through his veins. Shu screamed, and soon the thrashing stopped. He would never hurt her again. Lonnie had made sure of that. Shu composed herself and picked up Lonnie and returned it to its tank. Lonnie settled into place and lovingly looked up at Shu. The octopus pressed one arm against the glass. Shu stared for a long while, then smiled as she pressed her own against the glass, solidifying their bond forever. My friend Zamani and I were hanging out in my house one evening while my parents were at my brother's football game. We finished up a game of patchwork when she exclaimed, "Lissy, we should play Bloody Mary." She was into all those creepypastas and urban legends, but games like trying to call forth entities like Bloody Mary where you chant into a mirror scared me. Even the possibility of seeing Bloody Mary in the mirror, or worse, being dragged inside of it, was terrifying. But then she double-dog dared me, so I had to accept. We headed towards the bathroom, her slippers slapping next to the squeak of my wheels against the hardwood floor. Stopping by the bathroom door, Zamani picked up the wooden cross on the wall next to a family portrait. "You'll have to move that for now. There's no way Mary will come with that there." I took the cross from her and put it in the nearby linen closet. I slowly opened the bathroom door, as if I expected Mary to be there, waiting for us, wielding her axe. My heart was already thumping. We entered, closing the door without turning on the light, so we were in total darkness. Facing the large mirror over the sink, we held hands and chanted, "Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary," 12 times. We paused before the 13th, which would complete the incantation. I whispered, Do we really want to do this? I could sense Zamani's grin as she laughed and cried out, "Bloody Mary!" And nothing happened. We waited. Still, nothing. Relieved, I swiveled back for the light switch when Zamani grabbed me and whispered, "Lissy, she's here." But there was nothing in the mirror, or at least it was too dark. I couldn't even see our reflections. I flipped on the light, looked back into the mirror, and gasped. Zamani didn't look like, well, Zamani. In her reflection, her eyes were black, soulless orbs. Freckled skin now sickly looking and flaky. And that smile, more like a grimace stretching across her face, almost reaching her ears. Gone were her jersey and cutoffs, replaced with an ill-fitting white dress. White, but stained with vast and ever-growing patches of red blood. I screamed in panic. The door wouldn't budge. I looked at the thing in horror, saw it whip its head to me. I began to sob, sure I would die of fright if it didn't get me first. And then I bolted upright in my bed, as if ripped from a nightmare. It was nighttime. Had it all been just a dream? Despite my fear, I knew I had to check. As I headed to the hallway bathroom, I stopped by the linen closet, chilled to find the cross in there. I rehung it, angled inside, closed the bathroom door, and turned on the light. Psyching myself up, I turned around and stared into the mirror, only to see my so-called bad dream replay in the reflective surface. Zamani with black, soulless eyes, the maniacal grin stretching her face, the blood-stained clothing. I froze in terror, transfixed. Only this time at the end, my possessed friend stabbed me in the back, literally. I slumped forward, scrambling for purchase on the counter, expecting to see blood, feel pain. There was nothing, only shock, as I rubbed my eyes, and the vision was gone. The mirror only reflected my own terrified face. Whimpering, I somehow made it back to my room and fell back into bed. Then, I abruptly woke up again. Only this time, it was morning. The smell of coffee and pancakes from the kitchen, my parents and brother getting ready for school. I rolled upright and gasped as a sharp pain in my back took my breath away. I pulled at my nightshirt, looking in the nearby mirror hung on my closet door. There, exactly where I'd been attacked in the dream, was a new inflamed reddened scar. If the wound was real, then that meant the house line began to ring. My mom answered, then called out, "Lissy, honey, did Zamani sleep over? Her mom is on the phone and very worried. She didn't come home last night."
In January of 2013, a young woman named Elisa Lam flew to Los Angeles from Canada and checked into the Cecil Hotel. She was first placed in a hostel-style room, which she shared with another guest. But after 2 days, the front desk got a call.
"Hi, I'd like to make a complaint. The woman I'm sharing a room with is acting very odd. I don't feel comfortable. Is there any way you can move her?"
So Elisa was moved to a room of her own, and that was the last time anyone saw her. During her trip, she kept in frequent touch with her parents back home. But when they didn't hear from her when she was supposed to be leaving Los Angeles, they became worried and called the LAPD. Around the same time, the front desk kept getting more complaints.
"The water pressure in the shower is so low. The tap water is all black."
So a hotel staff member went up on the roof to inspect the water tanks. He noticed that one of them was open. He looked inside, and that's when he found Elisa floating in the tank. To this day, nobody knows how she got in there undetected. But there are a lot of theories. See, Elisa had bipolar disorder and depression, and was on prescription medication to help keep her in balance. She kept a blog where she wrote about her struggles with her illness and seemed to be very open about it. The most logical conclusion is that Elisa was off her medication, broke from reality, and drowned herself in the water tank. Another theory is that she was playing the elevator game. The elevator game is a ritual that originated on a Korean website. When performed properly, you can supposedly be transported to another dimension. In order to play, you need a building that has at least 10 levels. It's best played at night since you need to be completely alone. You enter the elevator and go to different floors in a particular order. Once you reach the 5th floor, a woman will get on with you. Whatever you do, don't look at her or speak to her. She isn't human. When you reach the 10th floor, you exit the elevator and enter a new dimension. You will still be in the hotel, but only you exist. Be careful. In this dimension, your cell phone won't work, and you may feel disoriented and even faint. If you wake up without taking the proper steps to come back to our world, strange things may happen. So what does the elevator game have to do with Elisa Lam? After news spread of her bizarre death, a surveillance video from one of the hotel elevators went viral. It showed Elisa acting very oddly in an elevator, pressing random buttons, talking to seemingly nobody. Was she playing the elevator game? The Cecil Hotel has since rebranded itself to Stay on Main. They can change their signs, but they can never change what happened within its walls.
Andre worked as a tester at Razer, a premier gaming company, which meant he got to spend hours every day in what they called the dungeon, gaming and giving feedback on the latest technology. One day, his colleague Sierra burst in with some new gear. She explained Razer was trying to get a big contract from a Korean company. They had sent over a pair of awesome VR headsets for a new horror game, and the monsters were terrifying. She wanted Andre to check it out. "Oh, too scared to play it yourself?" Andre teased. "Yes," she declared. She told him to record his feedback for her in the reaction video as he played. She'd check out the footage when he was done. Andre set up the camera, the game, and placed the fancy new VR helmet over his head. The screen went to a pop-up window that was full of what looked like wingding text scrolling on its own. The window suddenly disappeared and was replaced by another that read, "Installation complete." That was weird. Andre had never seen that code before. Suddenly, he was immersed into a 360-degree view. He was in awe of how vivid the graphics were. He jumped at the sound of an alien-like clicking noise behind him. He laughed at himself for being scared and noted the realistic, creepy sounds of the audio. After messing around with the character mechanics, he made his way through the first level. He spent a few minutes running around the labyrinth of corridors in the abandoned psych ward looking for a key. But soon, he began to feel sick. Like motion sickness, maybe? He hadn't ever had that before, but he was nauseated and sweaty in the tight helmet. His vision began to blur, and it all felt so real. As his avatar rounded a corner, a vent above him dropped down, slamming him in the head, throwing him to the ground. He looked up with a dreaded fear into the dark shaft. He screamed as a monster swung down out of the vent rapidly and jumped onto his character. The beast pressed into his chest with claw-like fists and burrowed into his character's body. The creature then began to eat his character from the inside until there was nothing left but his character's still beating heart. Andre could barely breathe. It all felt so real. As his character respawned, he suddenly heard Sierra shouting, "Andre, are you okay?" Sierra panicked as she pulled Andre's helmet off his head. He was laying on the ground in a pool of sweat, and he had a small cut on his forehead. Andre accused Sierra of pushing him over. She told him that was ridiculous. She only came to check in on him because she hadn't heard any feedback from him. Andre looked puzzled. "I only just started. You have to give me a chance to play through the game." Sierra told him it had been 24 hours since she had first dropped off the gear. At once, they realized Andre had been in a trance playing the game all night. Andre, still feeling queasy, said it felt like the monster was really digging into his chest, although he did find one glitch. He could never seem to get the pause function to work. Sierra told him he should go get some sleep. She would look into the pause glitch. As Andre was packing up to leave, his coworker Jay asked if he could try out the new VR. Andre told him to knock himself out and headed to bed. He was headed back to the dungeon the next day when Sierra frantically pulled him into her office. "There's something very wrong with the game," she said in a hushed tone. Sierra explained she noticed something foreign in the code, almost alien. And after yesterday, she went to watch the reaction footage of Andre playing. Sierra played him the footage. He saw himself with the helmet on, and when the vent swung down, Andre was knocked to the ground as if he was really hit. Then, when the monster jumped on his chest in the game, it seemed like there was something moving inside Andre's body. It looked like a bulge was running under his skin, pushing through first in his stomach, then up to his chest. No wonder it felt so real when the monster burrowed into his character. Something seemed to be trying to break free from the game world. Andre was terrified watching himself. He wanted to know what the company had to say about this. "That's the thing," Sierra explained. Sierra had done some research, and the company was shut down 2 years ago for unethical testing. She had guessed the cut on his head came from something that actually hit him, and that the pause button might not work if it wasn't a game. "You can't pause something that's real," she whispered. "We have to destroy that headset." In that moment, Andre remembered that last night Jay had asked to use it. Sierra and Andre ran to the dungeon. There was no sign of Jay. They were relieved, hoping he had gone home last night, but when Andre went to pick up the headset off the ground, he was horrified. Laying there was Jay's still beating heart, pulsing in a pool of his own blood. Whatever was trying to escape the game was now free.
Thanks so much for listening. Like and share if this video gave you the chills. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell for notifications. See you next time.